Well, hey, Cheryl. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Thanks for stopping by. For those of you that don't know, Cheryl was a co-writer on the song Be My Vision, which I released under an artist named Jason Everett. And it's my first release under that name. And we co-wrote that song a few months ago, last year, sometime, in the fall-ish, summer, I think?
Closer to December,
Oh,
actually.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's right. It wasn't like right around Christmas. We kind of like, hey, let's try to squeeze it in. So I'm glad we did. But so we're purpose here is just I wanted to give a little background to the song. And a lot of Cheryl's story was the primary inspiration for the song. And we met before that, but it was at an alpha group at church that we first kind of discovered, oh, you write poetry. And then some of the folks in our alpha group were like, hey, we know someone who might be able to help you write a song, and so we were like, oh, that's a great idea. So eventually we just got a date on the calendar and came in and we did it. And in the process of that, you showed me some of the poetry that you've written, and there was one line that really stood out, and immediately I was like, oh, there's definitely a song in there for sure. And do you remember what that line was? It was
I do.
Yeah.
It was, in the absence of sight, give me vision.
Yeah. And we were talking a little earlier, and I didn't know this before, but you had mentioned when and where you actually wrote that, which I was like, oh, I had no idea. But can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was a time when I was sitting in the pews at one of the churches I was attending and really, really struggling because I was dealing with some eyesight issues and was physically beginning to lose some of the sight in each of the different eyes. And so it was a prayer request that I put into the offering, that literally one sentence, in the absence of sight, give me vision. And I just put it in. I didn't sign it, anything. I put it in, and he answered.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that. So we were talking off camera earlier, just a little bit about like you had up till that point really had no relationship with God, faith. Like you were pretty much just kind of like, nothing. And tell a little bit about the story about how that kind of came to be.
Yeah. So as you said, I did not grow up in faith. And so I didn't have much of a background, and I didn't have a whole lot of friends either that were growing up in faith. And so, I was all about me. I was all about athletics and corporate and, making my way in the world when this eye condition happened to me.
Yeah.
And it was pretty scary. Very first time that happened, I lost part of the sight in my right eye, and the medical establishment has no idea why. And to this day, they still don't know why this happened to me. Happened in the other eye as well. And so I started to have vision loss in both eyes, which kind of shook me to my core. And it was that experience that ultimately led me to God and into a church. I had happened to be walking one day, and I just turned and walked into a church that day. And that was the beginning of, kind of learning about Christ, learning about God and all that he can do for you. And so that was the beginning of really a new experience in a new life.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So, and we talked a little bit about this before, but what, like, you just kind of walked into a church, which is, some people might think is crazy. It's just like, and you had really no idea why.
Yeah.
And
And it was, I always had like this internal feeling that something was missing, regardless of how successful I was and whatever I was doing. And I was in a spot where I was lost. very much lost and just wandering and looking for answers and trying to fill it. And as I was walking past this church, I just had this feeling and this, I'm going to say, a calling to turn and walk into it. And so I knew nothing, right? So I try the front doors and they're locked. I don't know what. Shouldn't be locked, right?
They're always open in the movies.
Exactly. They're always open in the movies. And so I made my way around to a side door, which happened to be open. And there was somebody that was in the church that day. And they were very gracious with their time and really just sort of welcomed me and asked me what I was doing. I can only imagine. What are you doing here? But showed me around the church and asked if, do you want to see the sanctuary? Remember, I didn't grow up, so I didn't even know what a sanctuary was. But, I still had enough of that pride in me. Of course.
What you got going on here? What you working with?
Exactly. So, but they invited me to come back, and I heeded that call, and I went back.
Wow.
And from there, I just sort of snowballed from there and continued to learn and continued to study and really continued to see God working in my life that ways I never expected.
Wow. And when you had your eye condition, you had mentioned earlier that like you had stopped driving because you like
I didn't know.
Yeah, and then so you wrote that line in a church. How long after like the like when you put that line in the offering, like where was that like in the timeline of how this was like kind of all going on?
Yeah, so that was probably a couple of years after the beginning of the eyesight issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I could figure it out for myself. The best doctors in the country couldn't figure it out, but maybe I can. Yeah. And so I searched and I researched and I tried, and it took me a little while before I finally realized I can't do this. I can't do it on my own.
Yeah.
And when I realized that and I wrote that line and I put it in the offering, it was a couple of weeks later, I found myself actually on a beach. And that was the point where I realized I was completely surrendering. I had to surrender and hand my sight over to God, and the beginning of really growing from there.
Yeah. And you got a background, like at this time and prior to this, you were a competitive athlete in like skiing and water sports, right?
Yep.
And then as well as corporate America, my wife and you have some background in biotech and have that shared experience. And so you've always been a good sounding board for some of the crazy that can go on in that sector. But so when we got together to write the song, you had never written a song before. You'd written a lot of poetry, but never a song. What kind of expectations or thoughts did you have like coming into that process as like, okay, what's this going to be like?
I had no idea what I was walking into. And so, as you mentioned, I had started writing poetry again.
Mm-hmm.
I had taken a very, very long break from it. It was a way for me to express myself. Mm-hmm. And, the poetry that I was writing at that point was a way of me getting my thoughts down and expressing how I came to faith. Mm-hmm. And what it meant to me. And so coming into the songwriting, for me, what was important is that the essence of what I was trying to share in the poetry came out. But aside from that, I am not musically inclined typically, don't know what I'm doing. And so was really thankful that you were willing to help guide as well and provide some of the direction and how to pull it all together and how to pull it off the page of poetry into song lyrics, because they are a little different.
Yeah, for sure. And so, there's probably, I don't know, in some ways more restriction in songwriting because it kind of you have to have a melody and it has to kind of make sense rhythmically and all those things. And so and I had really no expectations either. I didn't know, other than like I was really inspired personally by the poetry that I had read prior, and especially that line. And like if I can't turn that into a song, I should just quit, right? And so, but it's every song, especially a co-write, for those of you that are maybe songwriters or want to songwrite. It's always different. I have co-written with people who have written lots of songs and have walked out with little to nothing. And then here, you've never written a song before, and we walk out with, in my opinion, a really good song, and certainly a song that says what we wanted it to say. And that's the biggest thing. I think we both kind of wrote the song for us first, and then like, hey, if it can be helpful to anybody else, awesome. And when we wrote it, I had no idea. When we were coming in, at first I was kind of thinking maybe we'd write like a worship song that we could use in church. That's usually when I'm doing, we both go to the same church, all that. I think that would have been cool. But as we got to writing, the songwriting process just didn't take us that way. It was a little bit more storytelling, and probably ended up being what would be more of like an artist-driven song, certainly faith-based and spiritual in nature, but probably not something like, not a worship song format per se. So we got together. We came into this space right here, actually, and about 3 or 4 hours, I think we walked out with the song. That's about, if you go listen on Spotify or wherever, about 95% of what you'll hear is what we walked out with that day. We made a few small tweaks to the melody, and a couple of small tweaks, massaged a couple lyrics here and there, but that was pretty much it. What was the moment when we were in the songwriting process that you first felt like, oh, maybe this is something? Or like when you first kind of like, hey, I think maybe this is a song?
Yeah. So for me, it was, we had written the chorus, we had written some of the verses at that point, and it all felt right. But it was when we put the bridge together and we talked about that he's the way, the truth, and the light that leads you home. That was the part that just really hit me and went, that is exactly the feeling that I want to get across. Right. In that, just that reliance and dependency.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? I found, like, as I'm sitting here thinking about that, and it just occurred to me now, hadn't thought about this before, but I feel like, especially in faith and for us, in Christianity, like, you were searching. Isn't it so interesting? And I can't think of any other arena in life where this happens, but you have this sense of home, but you've never been there, right? Like it's a place that feels like home, but you've never been, but we're somehow all kind of searching for. And you feel like you've found it, obviously, and so have I. And so, like, if there's somebody out there that's, you stumbled across this on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, and like feel like something's missing or struggling in their faith, like what advice or what would you tell them to do or to not do or whatever? What would you say?
Keep trusting in him. Right. And in the highs and the lows, and remembering that he is there for you.
If you had to pick one lyric or one line out of the song that you feel like best tells like the story that you initially kind of felt like you wanted to tell, are there any one line or any particular lines that kind of stick out to you as like, hey, this is kind of like the synopsis, this is the snapshot?
It goes back to that one sentence I wrote in the prayer.
Okay.
Right. It goes back to, now we tweaked it a little bit. In the absence of sight, be my vision.
Right.
And I think that being my vision is really what I hope that song articulates, is that, if you're lost, if you're struggling, you can't find your way, he can be that vision for you, but you got to let him.
Yeah.
Right. And invite him in.
Right. And I think, like, for me, if I were to answer the same question, I think it is, when I can't see, be my vision. And the part that speaks to me the most in the song that I feel the most strongly connected with is like just God's gift of presence.
Yeah.
Like, it's like even not just giving me vision, but being my vision. Like, our hope is in a person. It's in a relationship. It's not in circumstances. Now God's healed you in your eyesight in remarkable ways. But had God not done that, there would still, he was still with you in that process.
Exactly.
And I find that the gift of presence that God gives to us is amazing. That it doesn't always change our circumstances, but it does change our perspective and our sense of peace and our sense of home and our sense of our centeredness, knowing that, God does, is still sovereign. Bad things happen to quote unquote good people all the time. We can't explain all of that. And that's way beyond the scope of this, but it is the things, it is the questions that most of us, throughout a course of a day or a week, we are confronted with, why does evil happen in the world, and why, all those things, but yet God's still always there. He's present, drawing, wooing, giving, loving us to himself, but never forces himself upon us, because it's always it's just grace. And God, it's a mystery, right? But yeah, it's an amazing mystery.
Yes.
And it's a mystery that we hope that everybody can experience in some capacity. And it will look different for everybody.
Yeah.
What do you want people to walk away with after hearing this song, Be My Vision, or this conversation? What would you hope that, hey, if they spent the last 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever with us, what would you hope that they would take away from that?
Hope. That's the word, right? I would hope that they have hope in God and know that he is there. He can lead you. He can show you the way, right? And to take right out of the lyrics, he's the light that brings you home. Right. And regardless of where you are, trusting and being patient and knowing that he's there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And that the peace that comes with that is like the Bible uses the word, peace that passes all understanding.
Right.
And that's perfectly said, because there are times, and there have been times in my life where I've had what can just be described as a supernatural peace. It doesn't, it's there. It's this centeredness that you can't explain. And the world might be like chaos around you, but yet you still feel like, hey, not everything is okay, but it's all going to be all right.
Yes.
Kind of thing. Yep. And so that's that. So is there a question that a good interviewer would have asked you that you hope that maybe I would have asked that I haven't asked? Anything about the song or your testimony or experience that might be helpful to anybody watching this?
What I think about is it's never too late in your life to find God. And so I came to faith quite late, and the eye condition brought me, but it's never too late. And so planting those seeds is so important. And I think that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for hanging with us here. If you haven't heard Be My Vision, we've got links in all of the descriptions and the comments and all that stuff below. Go to give it a listen. But thank you guys for watching. Check out the link, Be My Vision, available everywhere, and go check it out. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.